David Protein is the undisputed king of today's protein maxing culture. 28 grams of protein, 150 calories, zero sugar, 75% calories from protein. But there's a reason David bars can achieve these impossible stats, and no one else comes close. Underneath the shiny golden wrapper is a log that doesn't look like food, and that's because a lot of it isn't actually food. David bars are made with a lab-created synthetic chemical, specifically designed so that you can't digest it. There's almost no data on how safe this ingredient is, and the FDA never officially approved it. But the fake indigestible calories aren't even the scariest part. When you trace the money behind this sleek wellness brand, you get a story about how a former weed dealer teamed up with a close Jeffrey Epstein associate to monopolize an unverified chemical and sell it to the masses, disguised in this beautiful wrapper. To understand how the trap was set, we need to look at the architect, Peter Rahal, the founder and CEO of David Protein. If that name sounds familiar, it's because he's also the founder of the once viral RX bar. Peter famously bootstrapped his first company with $10,000 and made RX bars in a Cuisinart out of his parents' garage. He was heralded as a genius 20-something startup founder who sold clean, natural protein bars the old-fashioned way. No outside investors and no ingredients you couldn't pronounce. No BS is how they put it. In their first year, RX Bar made $2 million in sales and grew exponentially from there. Peter attributed RX Bar's success to their allergic reaction to private equity and his dad's advice of selling his first 1,000 bars before taking any outside money. In just 5 years, he sold the company to the cereal conglomerate Kellogg's, turning $10,000 into a cool $600 million using his newfound wealth. Peter invested in better-for-you food companies like Olipop, Mush, and Lesser Evil, all of which have had huge come-ups and return on investment. But Peter wasn't done. As soon as his non-compete with Kellogg's was over in 2022, Peter set out for Act 2, perfecting protein. In his first act, Peter really leaned into the paleo trend and the all-natural thing. When those trends died, RX bars died with them. With his latest venture, everybody expected Peter to start another scrappy, better-for-you whole food underdog, just like RX Bar and the companies he's invested in. But Peter took the complete opposite approach, spawning David Protein, named after Michelangelo's infamous sculpture of the ideal male form. Arguably in an infinitely better financial position than when he bootstrapped RX Bar, Peter could have easily funded David himself. He didn't. Instead, he raised $10 million in seed funding before producing a single bar. The anti-private equity founder quietly became a venture capital dealmaker. Using that seed money, Peter brought in heavy-hitter influencers.
I was never a big fan of bars until I discovered David bars. If you give them a try, you'll know what I mean.
Hired the trendiest LA ad agency and stockpiled the expensive ingredients that would go into his new product.
That's when we came across this ingredient that's a modified plant fat. This was an ingredient that we really wanted to be able to help steward into the future.
Because Peter isn't just chefing up bars. As a former weed dealer, creating market demand is his gift.
Cultivating and selling marijuana taught me to always have a nose for demand and see if there's demand in the market. And if there's demand and you create supply, you have a great business.
Drawing from today's looks-maxing clavicular culture, the Ozempic-fueled protein-maxing market, and cloud-maxing always-online internet, Peter set out to create a brand that could not only go viral, but would mog any protein bar that came before it. And seemingly out of nowhere, David began to dominate.
I got the viral David Protein bar.
These have been getting so much hype.
David Protein, the most viral food brand of the year.
David sent samples to fitness influencers for reviews to build momentum. Combined with the influence of famous podcasters Peter Attia and Andrew Huberman, David built hype never before seen in this category of ultra-processed logs. David became a if you know, you know biohacking secret, quickly turning the gilded bar into a 150-calorie status symbol.
My favorite flavor, cake batter, David. That's the bag of the day.
This hype moved $1 million worth of David bars in their first week, selling out their entire stock. Peter was proving that he ain't no one-hit wonder.
Estes, please welcome to the pod the Prince of Protein, the Baron of Bars, the Lord of Longevity.
But it wasn't just the splashy marketing, because Peter didn't just take the opposite approach with his funding. He took the opposite approach with his ingredients. His first company, RX Bar, was built on transparency. Dates, nuts, egg whites, no BS, front and center. But if you look closely at what is actually inside David's golden wrapper, you realize it is a stretch to even call it food. Peter's moat isn't a cool protein bar. It's a patented lab-engineered chemical that has questionable effects on your body. David Protein calls itself an anomaly of a protein bar. And that's true. But that anomaly has less to do with food and more to do with petrochemicals. There's an ingredient that allows David to sell its bars with 28 grams of protein and only 150 calories. For comparison, this serving of Costco chicken nuggets has 16 grams of protein for the same calories. That's only 57% of what's in a David bar. If you look at the ingredients for a David bar, everything looks normal. But zoom in. Modified plant fat, EPG. EPG stands for Esterified Propoxylated Glycerol. David calls it modified plant fat, but that's an oversimplification of what it really is. At the molecular level, normal fat looks like this, and EPG looks like this. EPG starts out as regular canola or seed oil. In the lab, they separate the molecules that make up the oil: glycerol, which holds the fat together, and the fat itself. And this is the moment normal food becomes a synthetic chemical. Using heat, pressure, and chemicals, scientists force the glycerol to bond with propylene oxide, a byproduct from refining oil into petroleum that's typically used in plastics and antifreeze, and is a known carcinogen. This process is the P in EPG. But doing this just makes industrial sludge. So they run a second process, esterification, the E in EPG, to chemically weld the fatty acids back in. And finally, according to their own FDA paperwork, they filter, bleach, and deodorize the chemical until it perfectly mimics a cooking oil. When all is said and done, EPG has 94% fewer calories than real fat. With real fats, our stomachs break down the fatty acids from the glycerol and turn it into calories. But when we eat this EPG concoction in food, that chemically injected plastic in between the glycerol and the fat prevents our bodies from breaking it down. That means we can't turn this substance into calories. And it's why David protein bars can say they're only 150 calories. Recently, David was sued because independent tests showed that David bars had way more than 150 calories. This is because of the EPG. You might be consuming 270 calories, but your body is only digesting 150 of them. Less than a month later, the lawsuit was dropped, and Peter did a victory lap. But this case doesn't address the fact that EPG is a highly questionable food additive, and how EPG came to be tells us the story of where it's going. EPG wasn't some random scientific discovery. Its origins trace back to a similar ingredient that was eventually pulled off shelves for causing explosive diarrhea.
Introducing new Lay's Wow potato chips. They taste just as good as regular Lay's, and because they're made with Olean, they're half the calories and 100% fat-free.
In the 1980s, Procter & Gamble created Olestra, a fat substitute that's chemically similar to EPG. And it was popular because at the time, everyone blamed fat for heart disease. Eating food with Olestra, like these Lay's chips, was a cheat code.
Would you believe it that these are totally fat-free?
No.
Arco, yes, the gas company, wanted to compete and created their own version of Olestra, EPG. They teamed up with Best Foods of Hellmann's Mayo notoriety to bring EPG onto the market. But before they could do that, people were noticing a problem with Olestra.
Bring back Lay's Wow chips with Olestra.
Those chips were recalled in the 90s for causing explosive diarrhea.
Olestra caused a lot of tummy problems and was pulled off shelves before EPG even had its chance.
Only a matter of time before products containing Olestra cause deaths. The only thing that should die is Olestra itself.
Arco and Best Foods saw the writing on the wall and killed the project. But coincidentally or not, a team of Davids worked really hard to bring EPG back to life. After the Olestra debacle, Arco donated their EPG research to Kansas State University, where it sat dormant until the 2010s, when a former Dow Chemical executive discovered its hidden potential in the growing proteinmaxxing zeitgeist. David Rowe acquired the rights to EPG under a company he founded called Chocofinesse, and he brought in a bunch of former Dow scientists to get EPG to market. Dow Chemical, while not directly associated with Chocofinesse, is a company synonymous with controversy. David Rowe was a pro at commercializing toxins from his tenure at Dow, but he still needed to make EPG look safe. Luckily for him, Arco and Best Foods already did a lot of the heavy lifting. In 1997, Arco funded a study that looked at the safety of EPG in humans. Arco brought in Michael Davidson, a scientist that had worked on clinical trials for Olestra, and David Beschel, a scientist at Best Foods who worked on the animal toxicity of EPG. For 8 weeks, they compared the diets of 139 people. Some got EPG, and others got margarine. Not surprising, they found that statistically, EPG was no more toxic to humans than margarine. This is the entire safety foundation of EPG. A 2-month study on 100 people. But it was good enough! In 2014, David Rowe hired a company called Intertech to resurrect this study and publish it as gospel in a very real peer-reviewed journal. Step 1 was complete, but this petroleum derivative still had to pass muster with the FDA. Drawing from his previous line of work, David Rowe knew the FDA shortcuts. If you want to feed humans a novel chemical, the FDA gives you 2 options: a FAP, food additive petition, and GRAS, generally recognized as safe. FAP is the gold standard, where the FDA is directly involved in the process. A company submits raw data, the FDA reviews it, they go back and forth, let the public comment, and years down the line, the FDA finally approves it. GRAS is more of a self-certify situation. A company hires or rents its own scientists. The scientists say, yep, it's safe. The company tells the FDA, yep, it's safe. And the FDA is like, okay, no questions. The GRAS label was meant for common ingredients that are known to be safe, like salt and pepper. But trans fats in chips, taro flour in Daily Harvest bowls, and BVO in Mountain Dew were also first labeled as GRAS. Then the problem started, and the FDA banned them. Don't get me wrong, food additives that went through the more grueling FAP process were also later found to have issues. P&G spent $500 million in 1980s money getting Olestra FAP approved, and it was still problematic. David Rowe only raised $2 million to get EPG through the FDA. He ain't got time to FAP, so you can guess which route he took, but it's worse than you think. Remember Intertech, which published that tiny Arco study on EPG safety? David Rowe got the same company to do their GRAS application, and the person at Intertech who spearheaded this, David Beschel, the guy who worked on EPG for Best Foods 30 years ago, and who is at this point a regulatory consultant for Intertech. David Rowe essentially bought himself a fixer to fast-track his chemical through the FDA, using the guy who spent a better portion of his adult life researching the very chemical. David Beschel conducted the original study for Arco in 1997, published the study via Intertech in 2014, cited that study on the Chocofinesse GRAS paperwork, paid the independent panel of scientists to review it, and signed the GRAS application himself in 2015. There was nothing independent about how EPG was deemed safe. And of course, the FDA had no questions, paving the way for this pair of Davids to unleash EPG onto the world. But people who have eaten David bars have already reported gastrointestinal issues, including leaky orange poops. Even in that 1997 study, several subjects had to drop out because they had nausea, diarrhea, and oily urine. Meal review. Have a David Gold chocolate chip cookie bar. Is it supposed to come out the same way it looks going in? 3 out of 10 for artificial flavor, 4 for texture, 11 out of 10 for orange creamsicle diarrhea. EPG's parent company, Chocofinesse, which rebranded to become Epogee, clever, is no longer just a supplier for David Protein. After the incredible launch of David, Peter Rahal realized the limitations of his secret ingredient was keeping him from printing money. Epogee couldn't keep up with demand for David bars, so Peter raised $75 million in a Series A to buy Epogee, securing the world's supply of this modified plant fat, cutting it off from would-be competitors. But this can't be right. How can David bars be bad? The entire internet, including a lot of doctors and health professionals, say they're perfectly fine and an incredible source of protein. To sell a soft brown log to the masses, Peter Rahal needed to make it look enticing. And for that, he brought in Dayjob, a Los Angeles ad agency responsible for some of today's most viral brands. For David, Dayjob created all those New York subway ads, the COD campaign, the social ads.
I let it sit on my tongue. I wanted to feel every inch of it melt inside me.
And most importantly, that luscious golden wrapper. But wrapping shit in gold only gets you so far. To convert the masses, Peter Rahal brought in Peter Attia and Andrew Huberman. These are some of the biggest names in the longevity and biohacking space. Peter Attia has a New York Times bestselling book, a YouTube channel with 1 million plus subscribers, a podcast with over 100 million downloads, and a news segment on CBS. He's like the rich dad, poor dad guy, but for health. Andrew Huberman has a podcast that ranks 24 in the entire US, a YouTube channel with 7 million subscribers, and is a professor at Stanford. He's like if you mashed together Joe Rogan and Bill Nye. These guys are household names, and they aren't just influencers for the David brand. Peter Attia was David's chief science officer, and both Peter and Andrew were initial investors in the company. There's certainly merit to the content that made them popular, but to push David protein bars is peak hypocrisy. And I get it, when you have money on the line, you have an obligation to glaze your product. Andrew Huberman talks extensively about how ultra-processed foods engineered in labs hijack the brain.
When people start eating minimally processed whole foods, I have to assume that their brain changes as it relates to appetite, craving, and just kind of an unconscious understanding about what food is providing them or not, and that highly processed foods basically bypass all of this and just get you to consume more.
But Andrew is totally cool with knocking down a few David bars made with petrochemical altered fat after the gym.
Also make it a point to eat 1 or 2 David bars per day as a snack, which makes it easy to hit my protein goal of 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight.
Peter Attia's entire philosophy is about how the modern human body is sick because our diets are completely divorced from that of our ancestors.
We didn't evolve eating ultra-processed foods, let alone processed foods. If you look at the ingredient list, David, the sheer number of molecules there would suggest we're playing Russian roulette here. I don't recognize half the names of the things on the bag of Doritos.
Yet, as chief scientific officer of David, Peter's endorsing David bars derived from esterified propoxylated glycerol.
David uses a modified plant fat to help achieve the texture of fat, but with fewer calories.
And here's the thing about Peter Attia. He's also had some questionable medical advice. Earlier this year, Peter was caught with his pants down emailing Jeffrey Epstein, not once, but in over 1,700 exchanges. And they're quite chummy. The biggest revelation in the Epstein files wasn't his V60 recipe. It was David's founding investor advising, "Pussy is, indeed, low carb." And ladies, David Protein is coming for you.
These are actually so good, and I swear I'm not just saying that because you guys paid me a lot of money.
David Protein is yet another case of problematic wealthy people using their influence to pull the wool over the eyes of unknowing consumers at the risk of not only your money, but also your health. So the next time you pick up a David bar, if you haven't gone the orange poopies yet, remember, you're paying a hypocrite founder and a close friend of Epstein to be used as a lab rat for ingesting synthetic petrofat with unknown long-term effects that was created by a gas company and controlled by ex-chemical executives. Thanks for watching.